Hello and welcome. I am really looking forward to today's show, and I'm trying something new with amazing women. We have Tanya Lynn, we have Dr. Nicole and Laura Swan, and we're going to be chatting about the divine feminine and somatic work. So, Tanya, would you first of all maybe just introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tanya, and I am the founder of Sistership Circle. So I train women all over the world how to fill, lead, and grow their women's circles. And I am really excited about this conversation because somatics has just become such a huge part of my work as we have just discovered, so much trauma coming up in circles, and I live in Costa Rica. So I am excited to be here from the jungle.
Oh, welcome. So happy to have you here. And I was thinking about it. I think we're about, what, 15 years knowing each other at this stage? When was it you moved to San Diego? What year?
Yeah, we met in 2010.
There you go. Oh, well, welcome. So happy to have you here. And Dr. Nicole, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm my heart just feels so excited just to be in this particular group of women. I'm so happy to see you all. Yeah, so I'm a somatic therapist, and my method is called somatic reparenting, which is just what it sounds like, an integration of somatic therapy and reparenting work. And the overarching umbrella of all of my work is nervous system regulation. And so I help people unfuse from the wounded inner child so that their come from and relationships can be their integrated, regulated woman. So it's about healing and really teaching people how to hold and empower themselves at the deepest level.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And Laura?
Hello. I'm also so excited. You three individually are three of my favorite people in the world. And so to have you all in one place is just such a heart bursting delight. So I'm Laura Swan, and I have been leading women's circles since I was about 16. And they've come in many different shapes and forms, but I've been leading women's work for many years. It's something I'm deeply passionate about. I'm also passionate about private work, and I'm trained as a psychotherapist and an energy healer and intuitive healer. And I combine all of that and integrate it in my private work. And I have recently, in the recent year or so, really started to study and understand somatics a lot more, and how critical it is in my private work and even, in group work. And really understanding it has just empowered my work individually with people so much more. So I'm really excited about having this conversation with all of you, and just being with you. It's such a gift to be here with all of you.
It does. It feels amazing, and I'm excited for this juicy conversation. So let's get stuck in. Well, let's kind of, I think, take it back first of all to I love this, the inner child, the reparenting ourselves. So would you like to start with that, Summer? Kind of the journey into that. And I think the first thing is, if it's new to anybody, like, what is somatic work? Maybe we could start there.
Yeah, sure. To me, reparenting work got really real for me going through a very traumatic divorce in 2020. And, I felt so young in my grief, and it's when it really got real for me. So for anybody that's new to reparenting work, if you've ever felt young in your anger or in your grief, you know that you need it. And it's really about becoming the divine mother and the divine father, and becoming the caregiver that you never had, learning how to nurture yourself, learning how to create boundaries and structure for yourself, like learning to retrieve all of those younger parts of yourself that might be emotionally frozen in time from whatever trauma has happened or wherever the nervous system got disrupted, really retrieving those parts. And I oftentimes feel like I'm just a guide, kind of holding people's hand, helping them traverse timelines a little bit and retrieving those parts that are frozen so that they can resolve what's unresolved, and then integrate those parts into their current self and into their present day woman, so that they become the secure parent, for their little girl. And that's really how I see reparenting work. And And somatic therapy, I landed in, my doctorate is in physical therapy, and only lasted about 3 years in that, and realized there was this massive psychosomatic component and nervous system component missing from my Western science education. And so I went and studied craniosacral therapy that led me into somatic therapy. And to me, somatic therapy is just learning to read the signs and signals of your body, learning to be with physical sensation, increasing our capacity to be with, whether it's pleasure or pain. Like we need capacity in our nervous system to be able to hold it. And so, there's a way, I see it all the time, day in and day out. There's a way that we can learn these to read these signs and signals of our body and develop a felt sense and enough, somatic awareness and body awareness to be able to regulate our nervous system, because that's what's needed. We have to be in the body, to be able to identify those moments of dysregulation so that we can efficiently bring ourselves back to a regulated state, which is where we have power. That is where we have power. It's like we don't have power over what triggers us. That's dependent on each one of our, past imprints and trauma, but we do have power, in that way. And so that's where I'm always orienting people to. It's like, this is where we have power. And this is where you can become really good and a master of your own energy, in a way so that you can, keep bringing yourself back to that ventral vagal state, because that's where we heal. It's where every system of our body can heal. And so to me, it's just, it's funny because I started in physical therapy, but somatic therapy is like, it should be in my opinion, it should have been taught to all of us in middle school or like high school, here's our human body. Here's how the nervous system works. Here's how to be emotionally intelligent. Like it is basics, but I love this conversation all the time because people see it as cutting edge, but it really should be basics for every human.
Yeah, I love it. So true. And Tanya, would you like to kind of share next of how this kind of embodiment came into your practice and how you express that now in your work?
Yeah. So, my journey is really discovering myself through Circle. And there was a time when I was going through a dark night of the soul and met the late Barry Green, who then basically took me on a journey into healing my mother and father wound, or what I call them. And so that was really the beginning for me back in 2013 of doing this deeper work. And it's just infused into everything that I do, because I believe like the majority of our traumas and our beliefs come from the period of 0 to 7 years old. And so going back into that, and it's not just like what we heard or what people were, saying around us, but also like how the felt sense was, what was happening actually in the body. And so for me, it's, we think that these things are happening here, but actually it's all just mirrors and all an opportunity to look and to heal and go back in time, but we do that through the body. And so it's just constantly, for me, the work is bringing women from being in their heads and thinking about things to how are you feeling? And as women, I believe we've been so cut off from the body, from feeling, that this can feel really uncomfortable and really scary and a little bit awkward, because we've been so cut off. And like some are saying, this should have been the education, but it wasn't. And our society really has set us up to stay out of the body, to stay into the head, to check out, disassociate. And so really we have the opportunity now that we are having these skills and learning these things to come back home into our bodies.
And I'm sure that's something with them, because I know you've got young children as well. So is that something that you're practicing daily with them, and or, at least?
Yeah, yes, and it's still challenging because they have such big feelings. And it's like, then here's the thing with parenting, that they are getting triggered and it triggers our little girl and she gets reactive, right? Because it's just bringing that up. And so as parents, like we have to make sure that we're resourced, especially as mothers doing a million things. Like, can I be resourced? Can I be, you know, taking care of myself so that I'm not, my little girl's not getting triggered by them, and I can just hold the space for them to allow those feelings to move through them. But that's, you know, it's challenging, it's hard, and it's not like they're getting the education in school. So yeah, I think it's, and also there's like being gentle with yourself as a mom, as a parent, and you know, especially like knowing the work. It's so easy to be like, oh well, I should be doing better. But you know, we're doing the best we can. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. And then Laura, would you like to share?
Yeah, I just think, I think it's going to be integrated into everything. Honestly, like this, it is cutting edge right now. And like Summer said, so freaking basic. Like it really is. Like just the basic understanding of how our emotional body works and like where those intense feelings can come from and what they're rooted in. And I trained, as a psychotherapist. So as a psychologist in psychology, it really does approach so much of psychological emotional challenges still from an intellectual like methodology. I mean, really. And I was blessed to go to a school where somatic therapy was a part of the curriculum. You had to really specialize in it in order to get the full education. But in the school I went to, there was a whole certification in it. And that's where I first kind of heard about it. I dabbled in it. I had been a yoga therapist, for many years, like teaching yoga for emotional conditions. And I realized like how much of it was overlapped once I started to study it. But it wasn't really until being in private practice for many years that I realized like there is a big piece missing, even from what I know. And I've studied energy work. I've done, all kinds of trainings, and the understanding of the nervous system and how it works just opened everything. It made all of my work like weave together and be able to really be able to help people at such a deeper level. Even what we understand about like psychedelics and using psychedelics in treating PTSD and trauma, like not understanding the nervous system, we can't really help people as much as is possible. So I just felt like studying that and integrated into the work I do, and also how it's helped me personally, to continue to understand, man, now that I have this understanding of the nervous system, it is so empowering. I still lose it sometimes, but at least I understand why and what's going on and how to repair it and how to fix it. And I was working with a doctor who does a form of treatments called counter strain. I don't know if Summer, if you've ever heard of counter strain, I definitely think you'll want to know about that. It's a type of like physical therapy treatment that helps to regulate the nervous system. It's specifically focused on the sympathetic nervous system and helping to regulate it. And it's, certain points. And I go to a doctor who works with this, and he's very into all of this. And he said that if every human could have a superpower, the most empowering superpower all of us could have would be to recognize when we're in sympathetic state and to know it immediately and to be able to shift it, because that is where all traumatic acts come from. It's where violence comes from. It's where yelling at our spouses. It's where, as soon as we get dysregulated, yelling at our children, child abuse, right? All of it. If we were to know we were in that state and be able to shift it back to a healthy state, so much less trauma would happen in the world. In fact, probably hardly any. And when he said that, I was like, gosh, that's so true. Wow, like if we really understood that and knew how to recognize when we are dysregulated, it would change the world. And so I'm excited about this conversation because of the feminine work that I've done and how body-based it really is, and how important it is for, as Tanya said, women to be able to move from this very culturally influenced being in the brain and in the mind, and be able to move back into our bodies. And this is a pathway to really help us do that and to understand it intellectually, but to be able to really shift it at the body level.
Yeah, and like there was a couple of questions what you were sharing there. And first of all, you're just like simply understanding the nervous system. And I thought maybe Summer, you could explain that to us, and then to know that when our nervous system is out of balance. So like, because I think that'd be really helpful for everyone to know, and then we can talk about ways that we practice that we just use in our own lives to get back in.
And so your question was, you want me to explain the nervous system, or you?
Yeah, like even just like simply so people can almost like have a visual like understanding, and then how would we know when we're out of balance? And then we'll talk about ways to get back.
I love this conversation. Yeah, so our nervous system it communicates to us through sensation. I think people have a basic understanding of what the nervous system is, but the old way that we were taught about the nervous system is that like sympathetic is bad and parasympathetic is good, and we just need to learn to relax and calm down. And this is one of the conversations I love having with women, especially all the time, is developing this really healthy relationship with our sympathetic nervous system and building this capacity in our system to be able, with our stress response, and to be able to like hold anger and hold, sympathetic charge in the body. It's really, really, really important. And it's part of what helps us get out of a freeze response and back to a ventral vagal state, or that calm present state. And so this is what I like break down in like the nuances and stuff when I'm working with my clients. But there's a whole list of like, here's the feelings of sympathetic hyperarousal, or you could say fight or flight, right? And it might look like anxiety or anger or restlessness or racing thoughts, or you just have too much energy in the body, or you feel stressed, reactive, you can't sit still, anything. And people are going to have different common denominators in that realm. But if you can catch yourself in that state, the feelings of fight or flight, if you can catch yourself in that state, that's where you have the most power to discharge that energy. It's going to be the easiest to discharge that energy using our movement, our breath, and our sounds to dispel that energy through, the body. But what happens is that because of childhood trauma, so many people are, stress and anxiety are so familiar. They're just so familiar to them. They don't even realize like they're in dysregulation because they've been in dysregulation since they were a kid. And so it's like learning to break down those learning to break down those feeling states so that people become aware of what they are and what they feel like in the body. Again, our nervous system communicates to us through physical sensation. And so being able to track physical sensation in your body. So if you feel anxiety, you're like, oh, I'm already in dysregulation. If I'm feeling anxiety, I'm already dysregulated if I'm feeling anger, right? And so what do I need to do? I need to discharge this energy using my movement, my breath, and my sounds. And if you can do that right there, you will stop all of the regrettable, I call them regrettable behaviors of the fight or flight, response, which is just like the angry outbursts and, being really confrontational and being really reactive and loss of patience and all of those things. And you can prevent your system from going into a freeze response. And so it was one of my main things for diving into the rabbit hole of studying polyvagal theory, was because when I was going through my divorce, even the last year of my marriage, I was going into freeze responses, and I was like, what the hell is happening to my body? And I just like needed to know like what was happening. And I became obsessed with like learning how to unfreeze my nervous system. And it was like just gold to me to learn that like, oh, I can actually catch myself when I'm here in fight or flight, and discharge this energy before my system becomes overwhelmed and goes into a freeze, and goes into a collapse. And that to me was just like such gold. I just have wanted to scream it from the mountaintops, like since I learned it, because I felt like I went through a lot of unnecessary suffering, just because I didn't understand like how it actually all worked. And so, our system won't go into a freeze response, will go into a freeze response when we either feel we can't escape something or like our needs aren't going to get met. And then that's when our system will go into a freeze, as well as if we just stay in those prolonged states of anxiety and prolonged states of fight or flight, system's eventually going to get overwhelmed and go into a freeze response. And so always orienting people to, here's where you have power, develop a felt sense in your body, develop your body awareness enough, that you can catch yourself when right in that moment you go into dysregulation. It is like, I love that that teacher said that to you, Laura. It's just like, that is the superpower, is like developing enough felt sense to catch it in that moment to be able to bring yourself back, because it's way easier way easier to discharge that energy in fight or flight than it is in a freeze response. In a freeze response, it's just like overcoming inertia and like you feel very unmotivated and uninspired to get up and do the thing. And so that's what I'm always orienting people to. Here's where you can actually prevent, a full collapse of your system.
And then you're drained and exhausted, and the ripple effect from that. So maybe, Tanya, thank you so much. Maybe you can kind of share with us, leading on from that, maybe tools that you use on a daily practice, when you feel that,
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes to everything that Summer said, and that has been so much like part of my journey as well. Is I didn't even realize this pattern that I would be in from the sympathetic to the collapse. And so for me, especially over the past year, I have been working tremendously on catching myself before I collapse and noticing what's happening in my body as I'm starting to collapse and not actually allowing myself to go there. And there's a difference for me around releasing, like through tears and releasing emotion and collapsing. And I think it's that piece of like the inertia or the hopelessness, the despair, the like I just can't get off the floor. That to me is the collapse, versus the tears sometimes are moving energy, moving the emotions, is actually activating and bringing me like more life, or having me feel a little bit, I'm releasing, right? I'm feeling better. So I worked with someone who was first just teaching me about the vagus nerve. And so one of the techniques that I've used is just simply connecting from the tip of my chin down my throat, down the center line of my body, all the way to the belly button, and just continuing to do that. And what that has led me to discover is that sometimes I just need to touch myself with that divine mother love. And especially, it feels like this is such a vulnerable part of the body, is the throat. And we get so caught in the throat, and then we get caught in the heart. We get, and then the solar plexus as well. So for me, this has been such a soothing, nurturing, and I can feel myself reparenting in that moment that I'm doing that. I can feel the mother love, and I'm giving it to myself. And so that's been just really, really empowering for me. There's so many different tools that I have learned. I am going through the somatic experiencing 3-year program. And that actually is a great resource for people. If you just follow Somatic Experiencing on Instagram, they're constantly bringing different resources together. But yeah, I'm just touching myself, giving myself the hug or the squeeze, and creating containment for myself has been really, really powerful. And so this motion here, and then pressing into the thighs, because my source of strength is in my legs. And so sometimes when I'm collapsing, I've lost a felt sense of my own strength. And so if I can reconnect with containing myself, feeling myself being held, and then connecting with the power of my thighs, my quads are my strongest, muscle in the body, that can actually bring me back into the body, and feeling more safe, secure, grounded, connected to my power, and prevent me from going into that collapse.
I love that. And I love when you were doing that, you could just feel you were like earthing, grounding into the earth.
Exactly.
And then I love that. Like I love going for my walk in the forest and just having a good cry. It's like a cleanse. It's just that afterwards I'm like, it's just let go. And when we let that, and it doesn't have to be, oh, this is for this reason or that, but it's just that like a clearing, isn't it? So thank you for sharing that. And just as you were like touching yourself, I was feeling that, you know what I mean? So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing this practice.
And that's a really important part. There's a beautiful, beautiful book called My Grandmother's Hands that I recommend everyone read on systematic racism. And he is a somatic practitioner. He's an SE graduate. And one of the things that he says is that a calm body calms other bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm regulating my nervous system, you felt that. You literally can have that sense in your body. And so we can do such great work by learning how to regulate ourselves and becoming these calm bodies. And we can actually regulate the whole field. And this is a lot of the work that I've been exploring more in circle, is that co-regulation within the group, within the circle, and how I can do that as the facilitator, or we can do that together to create that calm field where we're all in that. So yeah.
I love that. That's so beautiful. And I think if you have any kind of trauma, you look into the eyes of somebody who's got a balanced nervous system. It's just, that's the reset, isn't it? So I love that. And Laura, would you like to share next thought?
Sure. You want me to share on tools and ways that I use this also for myself?
Yeah, love to hear.
So, for me, I was raised mostly without having my mom around. And so, and when she was, the gentle, feminine, nurturing energy was not there. She was very depressed and anxious. And I'm very close to her now, I will say, which is the happy ending of that story. But for my whole childhood, I didn't have a feminine presence. And in the work I started to do with Circle and in the healing path I took, I really learned about the divine feminine and learning how to give that to myself, right? How to be that presence for myself. And now integrating that with what I know about somatic work and the nervous system, I realized all these years what I was doing was that. All these years I was mothering myself. I was learning how to tend to that little girl who didn't have what she needed. And in the times that I feel anxious, I realize like I revert back to a little girl who did not have a lap to fall into, who did not have a mother to hold her, who did not have that nurturing presence when I felt scared. And that was for like most of my young adult, my whole young adult life. My dad was great, but he wasn't a mother. And so having that presence not there, I had to fully learn how to be that and do that for myself. And so much of that came through the divine feminine work that I did, and through, learning to be in Circle and to lead Circle and to become that space for myself and for others. And the touch is so important when I'm feeling dysregulated, anxious, afraid about something that may or may not happen, feeling other people's energy around me and how that impacts me, because I'm incredibly sensitive to that, which I imagine all of us are, right? Feeling what others feel, being very empathetic and being an empath, and just being able to recognize when I'm not calm, something's going on, right? And so what do I need? What do I need? I'm doing this like all the time. Like my kids are freaking out in front of me and I'm like, now. Right? So I'm just constantly like touching myself in a way that is loving and nurturing, right? And also, when I really need to do a practice, the sound for me is everything. I mean, I have discovered that there is nothing more healing for me than the sound of my own voice. And I think I discovered that through being in ceremony, really. I mean, it took kind of like a major opening to discover that. And through my birth, or through my children's births, I discovered that my voice was the medicine that I needed. And I remember like when I was growing up and even, in my 20s, I would hear my own voice like on a recording and I'd be like, oh gosh, that sounds funny. Or I would think it sounded weird. I almost had like an aversion to my own voice. And I had this remarkable healing around that with the birth of my children, and discovered that my voice could get me through labor. right? That it would get me through every contraction, every bit of anxiety that came up. There was a tone or a sound that I would make that would neutralize it. And discovering that, I realized I can do that in my everyday life, right? I can tone, I can chant, I can make a sound, I can growl, I can just really move that energy in the moment, like Summer said, instead of having to deal with it afterwards, which is so much more difficult, right? When you're in the free state. And so really for me, it's sound, it's touch, and it's my own faith, my own spiritual practice, which is really tapping into the divine mother, to the divine feminine, being able to do that in the moment and then act as if I'm her to myself somatically is how it's how it all like integrates for me, right? It's how it all comes together for me, is being able to mother myself in that moment, be that presence for myself, whatever is needed, sound, touch, movement, dance, and move the energy. And therefore I also do that for my clients, right? I teach that to them. I do that with my children. The way this has helped my daughter, especially because she tends to run a lot more anxious. She's been like since the moment she was born, incredibly anxious. And so teaching her about this stuff and how to use this and regulate herself has also just it's been phenomenal. And she still freaks out, but she's so much better.
But don't you think they kind of like naturally know how to do that anyway? Like I mean, first of all, just we are slightly little animals, and when you can see with the dogs that they get something, they just shake it off, and I see it. Like I watch my daughter every night before bed. She about 45 minutes, she just dances and she's doing her gymnastics, she's like somersaulting around, and I can see that she's just releasing the day, and so she's channeling it through. Whereas my son might be in there and he channels it through his Lego. He's playing it all out in the Lego, so it's just really interesting that if we're born in kind of knowing how to channel this energy, right? And then it's like, I think then when we forget and then maybe trauma builds and then we get into that we've already got to that frozen state. And then it's just, as we start our conversation off, it's a way of being, and we don't even know that we're out of balance. So I think that's kind of the next question. What happens when this is all okay saying like, this is how we process it, but what happens when there's a lot of stored energy there? Like maybe Summer, you could take it from there.
I could talk about this all day.
Boring conversation.
Yeah. When it's what was happening to me, my system wouldn't have been going into freeze responses very regularly if I wasn't running, even if it was a low level of anxiety for a very long amount of time, and so I was needing to learn, like, what do I do with this? And this is not what I would say to do. This is just my personality. When I was like waking up with like 10 out of 10 anger or like 10 out of 10 heart anxiety, I would recommend this technique, which is just going into the ocean and screaming under the water. It like saved my life. I really feel like at some point. What I'm not recommending is this is just my personality. I will just tend to go into like the depth of the pain and the intensity until it's just all felt and all like until it just is done, and I don't necessarily recommend that for everybody, because what's really, really important is to titrate these experiences. And titration just means give your nervous system, small bits of challenging experiences. And so when there's a lot of, let's just say, anger, built up from many, many years and maybe decades for a lot of people, it's really important to, create safe spaces for yourself and create containers for yourself, so that when you go into that intensity and like something like, connecting your anger and your power, like to your voice, that might be something that you're not used to doing, and whenever you actually let the sounds of your anger come out of your voice. I just remember when I very, very, very first time was able to access anger, and a therapist like elbow was deep in my solar plexus and he was telling me to make sounds, and I was like, there was this like zero connection of like solar plexus to throat, and he just stayed with me, like pressed harder, and I was like, and it just started coming out, and it started coming out really strong, and it was really loud, and it was really like screaming and yelling, and it was quite shocking actually to my system, because I'd never heard myself make those sounds. And so what I needed after that experience was co-regulation. I needed somebody to look me in the eyes and tell me like, it's okay. Like that was just a big experience. You're okay, you know? And now since having that experience, it's very easy for me to access anger like that, you know? But what's really important whenever, you know, there's just years and often decades where people have built up sympathetic energy in the body that needs to be dispelled is to do it in a titrated way. And you can choose your medicine of how do you want to use your movement and your breath and your sounds to discharge that energy. Dance is in a beautiful way. I'm a bit obsessed with the feminine embodiment practice called S Factor right now. I'm taking the teacher training this summer. And it's just a brilliant body of work, but any type of really slow body-based, that's why I love S Factor. It's body-based, pleasure-led movement that's not performative. And what it's about is connecting to what you actually feel on the inside and then learning to express it through your body, you know, and in that way you make yourself congruent. It's like, and that's honestly, if we can catch ourselves in those moments of dysregulation, we just need to play out, you know, through our body, what we actually want to say, what we actually want to do, how we're actually feeling. And that it sounds easy. It sounds easy, but it's challenging for a lot of people of just like in the moment, whatever you're feeling internally, can you express it on the outside? And in that way, like you will make yourself congruent and your energy will match your words and your actions will match your words. And you become a very like congruent, coherent person in that way.
That's amazing. Thank you. And I think I'm a bit like you. I just go at it. You know, I was actually a Watsu experience, you know, which is somatic really, isn't it? You know, and maybe 20 odd years ago. And that was it. It was just hours and hours. It was just, and then that was it. It was open from then on, you know. So it's powerful when you access your voice that way and that sacred rage and whatever you need to be accessing. So thank you for sharing that. That's amazing. So maybe Tanya, you can take it from there and share with us.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed for myself is where I use old coping patterns. Work might be one, or the ways in which I will just continue to spin out. And, you know, if I'm feeling anxious, whether it's eating or work or wanting to project that onto my husband or, you know, someone else. And for me, it's been about number one, catching that pattern and not going down that route. So this has been a big practice of mine. And giving myself permission to pause. And it's like I'll go into like a spin out around, oh well, you know, I have to do work, and then that just like fuels it. And it's like, no, all that's gonna be there. I don't need to go work right now. That's not actually a healthy way of like dealing with this. What can I do to slow down and pause? What is a small micro thing that I can do to just take that breath? And the more that I can actually feel the tension in my body and practice just relaxing and releasing any of the pressure or the tension and pressure. And I worked with a somatic healer actually at the first place I lived in Costa Rica. And he did this very gentle rocking motion with my legs. He would literally just take my leg and rock my leg back and forth. And then he'd take the other leg and just rock it back and forth. And so there's these ways that we can, you know, just use very, very gentle movement, or even just not even a movement, but a micro movement of, can I feel my shoulders relaxing? Can I feel the jaw just loosening a little bit? And for me, it's been about those really tiny micro adjustments within the body.
Well, I'm like, I feel like I'm putty every time, like you do your jaw. I feel my jaw relaxing, you breathe. Like I feel like I turned into putty where you were like, you're really embodying what you're sharing, because I'm really feeling everything that you're describing. So
Yeah.
that's amazing. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Laura.
So the thoughts I'm having on this part, the way that we learn to self-regulate ideally is first through healthy co-regulation. Ideally, doesn't always happen that way, and that's where a lot of trauma comes in, right? Is if we don't learn co-regulation from a healthy attached figure, from father, mother, or grandmother, or someone, right, that can teach us what it feels like to be in healthy co-regulation, right? And so some of us didn't have that. I didn't have that. I had to learn how to do that. And one of the ways that I notice co-regulating really works for me is actually with my plants. And I know that it's not the same as a human, but being out in nature is like a co-regulation for me. I literally feel like I'm getting the calmness and the groundedness of the trees and of my garden. And well, my tortoise actually is a really good co-regulator, I have to say that. He's one of the best. I'll just sit with him, and he's, this several 100 million-year-old species, and I just put my hands on him, and he's just grounded and just sits there and looks at me, and he's so slow, like he's so slow. And when I'm feeling a lot of energy, I go hang out with him, and it reminds me what actually works. He's going to live to be 100, and he's very happy, and he just walks around very slow with a very regulated, for the most part, nervous system, not doing much. And so there's this way that for me, co-regulation, I've had to learn it through my own spiritual practices, my own healing practices, but nature and being in the trees, being on the earth, the groundedness and the calmness that I get from that practice has been honestly one of the most powerful of anything I've ever done. And animals, honestly, my animals have been, that's why we have therapy animals. My dog is like a therapy dog, my cat's like a therapy cat, my tortoise is a therapy tortoise. Chickens are not so therapeutic, I have to say. They're a little more anxious. They make me a little more anxious, but they make me happy. But this idea that like co-regulation can happen through many different sources in our lives, right? And I feel like nature is a very dependable one. There are times when nature is wild and crazy too, but I feel like she's pretty consistent with being reliable to be able to put our feet on the earth and feel earthing and grounded and calm, and helping our nervous system to be aligned with like the nervous system of the planet, right? With like aligning with her calm energy and her stability and consistency. And that for me just brings this, I'm held so that then I can hold for others. And I do a lot of holding for others between client, like all of us do, between children and clients and animals and, the pain of the world. We hold a lot, and we're running that energy constantly through our nervous system. And I don't think people even have any idea how many things are impacting our nervous system on a daily basis, right? I mean, if you made a list, it'd probably make you feel even more overwhelmed of all the potential energies at play at any given time.
Yeah, like a car driving by, or really
Yes,
fast.
right. And all the EMFs and cell phone towers, and just being in a city, just how much energy, right? You go to Hawaii and you get a little taste of what it's like to not be, or Costa Rica. You ladies live in the jungles, or okay, you're right, you're all in places where it's a lot more chill. You're all actually in my 3 favorite places, funny enough, where it's just, it's easier to be regulated when it's not so crazy around you in a city. And I think when I teach my clients that, I have so many here in San Diego that are local, and they think because you live in a beachside city, it's going to be chill. It's not. This city is not chill. There is so much energy in any city that is on our nervous system at any given time. So the ways that we can find co-regulation and regulation through nature, through sweet little animals, if we're blessed to be surrounded with them, and ideally also with the people we choose in our lives, right? That they can offer some of that too. Not all the time. They certainly can't all the time, but that we offer that for each other as well, as we're learning how to do that really more empowered for ourselves.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Just hearing a friend's voice, that can be so grounding. And I'm right there with you now. I think the one thing that hasn't been mentioned and I'd be interested in, you're talking about the animals, and I was thinking the hens, they're kind of like all over the place. But what they make me do all day long is laugh. So like
Yeah.
talk about laughter, because that's got to be one that just shifts the whole system. Like I have one hen who she just owns the house, she owns the garden, like she bosses all around. She cracks me up, and like I'm giggling at her, looking at her, and she shifts my energy. So maybe you could chat to that, Summer. Laughter, what is that? Now, I've never been able to the laughter yoga has never been, it's just got to be natural for real, like,
Oh my gosh. It's so funny. It's just reminding me of this lady that's in my facilitator training right now, and she calls herself the therapeutic humorist, is what she calls herself. And she's in her 70s, and she like speaks for the American Cancer Society. She's like in remission, and has healed. And it's just so beautiful every time. Like every time we come into a group together, like she's cracking a joke, saying something, making light of something. And I honestly feel like it's how I got through my childhood. I had a really, really funny grandpa, and his humor sort of spread throughout all the cousins and like all of our family, and we all are that way, and just crack jokes. And it showed up as a lot of sarcasm in the South when I grew up, but like we just all like made light of most things, and laughter is like, it's no different than like what Laura was talking about with like toning and using her voice. All of it will activate the vagus nerve and activate the parasympathetic nervous system and our relaxation response. So it's not rocket science. It just works. It works.
no, totally, absolutely. So I feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but I could carry this conversation on for hours. It's so juicy, and maybe we'll just have to do a part 2 or something. But if there were like 3 pieces of advice that you would give to everybody that's listening here today, and they're just like, okay, they can connect with the earth, they can touch and their own voice, toning. I mean, but what is some of the top advice you would give, to people that are listening and just feeling a lot of anxiety? And I think after COVID, the last few years, and just all that's going on in the world right now, collectively we feel things, but also just what's been going on in people's personal lives. What are the kind of main guidance you give?
I think the first one is I'm telling people all the time, like, don't make yourself wrong for feeling the way that you're feeling. I think that's really easy for people. So many people are just in this self-blame and self-criticism, and I should have healed this by now, and why does this still trigger me? And it's all very unproductive. It's not, none of it's necessary at all. So number one, I would say, is just don't make yourself wrong for feeling the way you feel. And then I guess that could segue into level 2 or number 2, which would be create space for yourself to be in your own energy, and create like containers for yourself, like, because a lot of people have this wound that they're too much, and what I'm feeling is too much, my emotions are too much, and I'm too much, and so you have to allow your inner child. You have to create some structure and container for your inner child to go wild and to be angry and to cry and all of the things, or to be fearful or whatever it is, to like let that out. And you have to hold this secure parent pillar of like, you're not too much for me. Whatever you feel is not too much for me. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere, and giving that part of our inner child that reassurance that maybe we never got as a kid, or, when we did express ourselves authentically, or we were vulnerable as a kid, we were, met with something else, dismissiveness or, disappointment. And so, yeah, just creating that structure and container for yourself, and being in your own energy so that you can actually feel what's yours and what's not yours. And I feel like, most people in relationship and sleeping in the same bed with the same person every night, it's like it enmeshes the energy, and it becomes difficult to understand like what's mine and what's not mine. So being in your own energy it's a massive recharge for me. I need it a lot. I need a lot of spaciousness in my schedule, and I just know that about myself. And my third one would be to get in bodies of water as much as possible. And I know not everyone is like an ocean baby like I am, but it can be an Epsom salt bath, but water is just she's such a beautiful container that holds, and transmute emotions. And so, that to me would go along with just number 3 would just be nature, as much of nature as possible for all of the reasons Laura was sharing.
Love those. Thank you so much. They're amazing nuggets.
I have one big one that was probably such a game changer for me with the somatic experiencing work that I've been doing. And that is the concept of resourcing. And I kind of touched on this before, but to expand a little bit on this is to really become aware of all the resources that you have. And those are both internal and external. And a resource can just be looking out the window and locating something that grabs your attention. Maybe it's a tree. And so we can actually just connect in with the energy of the tree as a resource. Or like I was saying, pressing onto my legs as the resource of my own legs. And how we can start setting ourselves up, especially as women, we get so overwhelmed, we take everything on, and we've got a million things that we're doing. We don't have to do it all by ourselves. So that's a big piece of this. And so what other resources that you can create for yourself? And in those places where we want to collapse, we can find that internal resource within our own bodies to support us in, in staying in our power. So resourcing for me has just been a game changer. And especially for moving to a foreign country, I don't have the community that I had in San Diego. I don't have my parents as a resource for my kids. So I've had to shift and start to look at, how do I expand and have resources in my life so that I'm not in the anxiety and the overwhelm as much. I'll just keep it at that.
That's amazing. It's just bring the awareness to, okay, what are the resources? And I love that. Just looking out the window and finding something beautiful ahead, that can even just shift things, right? So love that. Thank you so much.
So you both said some of my favorite ones already, but I think I'm just say a little differently, because it's exactly what I believe too. Summer, what you said about being in your own energy, it's just so critical, and for some people it can be scary to be in your own energy, right? And it can feel like you're a little lost with what to do. And I've, with my clients, I've seen that a lot. And sometimes they need a little guidance on what to do, like what to do when you're in your own energy, right? So what I will say to that is, if you can find a song that you love and that makes you feel good, right? Or makes you feel connected, and you can be alone with that song. And especially if you can also use your voice with that song and your body, then that is something to be in your own energy, and to really be alone with something that brings you a sense of feeling connected and feeling in your body. I have some songs that are really sensual and really they move my hips just the second I hear them come on, and that for women especially, I think it's important for all people, but for women to be in that type of sensual movement in our bodies. We're so programmed to not be connected to our bodies and to not actually feel how they feel, but to worry how they look, that we're lost in that. We're lost in the feeling of what our bodies feel like and how our bodies want to move. Kind of like you were talking about, Summer, with your S factor movement, right? That it's so important that we have a little container, especially, for every woman. But if you're a mother and you have little beings that are wanting your energy constantly, this is even more important, right? It can feel even harder and less likely that it's possible, but it's that much more critical that we take that time, because when there's energy being called on constantly by clients, students, animals, children, right? And we never have the opportunity to just resource ourselves in that container, like you mentioned, Summer, it can really be depleting. And if I don't have that for a week or even a few days in a row, I am totally depleted. right? As soon as I create a 20-minute container for myself to be alone in my own energy with a song I love and a little bit of movement, maybe some tears if that's what's needed, I am resourced, truly. And so it really doesn't have to be complicated. It can be quite simple. It can be short, right? So that's the main one. And the second one is this idea of glimmers that I learned also in somatic, which is similar to like a gratitude practice or just noticing the good, that we're also kind of retraining our nervous system to not always be scanning for threats, right? So looking for, I'm not going to have enough money. There's not going to be enough this person's going to be mad at me, right? That's scanning for threats, where we're kind of trained to, we're trained by the world to be looking for what could go wrong. And you're going to hold on to that way more and amplify that in your brain more than the little blessings and the beautiful things that happen throughout your day. So this is like taught all over the gratitude practice, right? But in somatic work, they call it glimmers, like looking at the little things that created a glimmer of light or love or hope. And it can be so small, right? I saw a flower that was beautiful. My child said, I love you. And it just gave me this little warmth in my heart, right? It can be so simple, but when you track those and make those big and kind of like amplify them, it will help our nervous system to calm down and to say like, okay, look, I'm actually safe. There are blessings. There are beautiful things in my life. And here I'm going to look and recount them from my day, and really take a moment when you see them to take a breath and take them in, right? To make it bigger, to make it feel bigger than the threats that we're scanning for all day long.
Amazing, amazing. And I just love and most of those practices I like to work in throughout my day, but I love all of them. None of them was like, go take a retreat for a week. It was just like, take 5 minutes, sing and dance to a song. Like nothing actually costs money either. It's just, and I think it can be really helpful to kind of create healthy habits where you just have a list written on your wall of like really quick things within 5 minutes. And you just kind of, because if you're starting to go out of balance, to even just be able to read the list and go, song, nature, whatever it is, touch, just to remind ourselves, I think that can be so powerful. So this was absolutely amazing. And what I'd love just before we say goodbye, maybe, and Laura, because you're right here, if you could share anything really exciting that you're doing right now that you want to share with us, would love to hear.
Well, there's contractors outside of my house right now, and that's very exciting. And landscapers. So there, right now I'm actually building my healing space locally, and we have a space where I lead local events called the Women's Temple here, and I'm doing a lot more local in-person work. I did a lot of virtual for a while. I still do. I still see people virtually, clients. But my home healing temple is going to be ready in about 4 weeks. And it's very exciting. It'll be a space for ceremonies and private work. And it's kind of like a prototype of a bigger healing center that we want to do one day. And we'll include, animal assisted therapy here and, garden work. And I'm just really, really excited to bring together all of the healing modalities under one roof and be offering that soon. So that's what I'm most excited about. And that's literally happening right now as we're speaking.
That's amazing. That's incredible. And it sounds like your turtle's getting a job. This
Oh, he's like, he kind of is almost full-time employed. Yeah, he's very useful in my sessions.
Oh, I think it's great. I can't wait to see when it's all built. It's going to be incredible. So I can't wait to see that. Maybe Tanya, you could share. I know you're always up to really exciting things. So would you like to share what's going on now?
Yeah. We are in the process of building our retreat space here in Costa Rica, de la Diosa, of the goddess. It's a temple space and retreat center. We are building our first dome, so we're going to have different domes on the property, and so it's a challenging time. It's a lot, and all the more reason to bring out all these tools. So yeah, we are just one foot in front of the other with that project.
That's amazing. Like you've land now in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Any kind of ideas to what it will be? 24, 25? What's the kind of where you'll be open for retreats?
I don't know.
Oh, well, I can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah.
in Costa Rica, so that'll be amazing. Anything else on the horizon? Anything you're doing online wise?
Well, I mean, if people want to check out the book that you're in, the Women's Circle Ritual Handbook, we always have that resource. And if you want to put that in the show notes, people can download 2 free rituals or buy the full book. And yeah, we just completed our big events. We do a big event, Rise into Leadership, and our How to Lead Circle program. It starts this week, so we're kind of in the after. Come down the mountain.
That's amazing. Well, it sounds like there's building going on all around.
Yeah.
Creation. So, well, thank you. And Summer, what's going on that's exciting with you?
Yeah, what's been most exciting for me this year is for the first time I've been running my somatic reparenting method facilitator training. And so I've been reminded how much I love teaching teachers and like teaching practitioners and coaches and therapists how to integrate somatic reparenting into their world. And so it's a really fun program because it's half of it's personal healing and half of it is professional development. And so I've been particularly stoked on that. I've run a group program for personal healing for people too. And then just over the last couple of years, really created and got my facilitator training out into the world. And it just brings me so much joy to be with, a group of practitioners that they already know the work, they trust it, and they can just dive in like so deeply. And it's a really beautiful 6-month container of, how to apply polyvagal theory and reprogram the subconscious mind and reparent and regulate yourself and then learn how to teach clients how to do that. And so I'll be running another one again this summer. And so that's probably what's most exciting to me right now.
That's incredible. I mean, I just want to say, like, it's such an honor being with the 3 of you today, because oh my gosh, the 3 are so incredible. And thank you for all this amazing work that you do in the world and on yourselves, just so authentically as well. So thank you for being here and sharing. I just so appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thank you, loves.